So the Boston Celtics head into this offseason with a lot of questions for the first time in a very, very long time. If you think about it, they've had stability. They had a roster that was seemingly unbeatable until they met the New York Knicks and lost in 6 games. But you look at this roster, it's kind of old if you think about it. Drew Holiday is, I believe, 34, he'll be 35. Kristaps Porzingis is an old 30. Al Horford's probably either going to retire. Maybe he's got 1 year left in him. Who knows? And then Derek White is 30. Jason Tatum will be 28 when he comes back from his Achilles. I'm not saying he's old. I'm just trying to paint this picture for you guys. But their role players around Tatum and Brown, they're north of 30, or they're at a stage where they can't stay healthy like a Kristaps Porzingis. So the Celtics got to figure out what they're going to do next, because if they stay put, they got to pay that $500 million bill, and that's going to hurt them in different areas like draft picks, options to pick up players. So the Celtics got to figure out very quickly, and I think they will. Moves need to be made. The first thing I'm looking at when it comes to the Celtics is, how soon can we be contenders, and what's the timeline on that? I say it's going to take them at least 3 years. And the reason why I believe it could take them that long, well, when it comes to Achilles injuries, it might take Tatum an entire season just to get in rhythm, just to get comfortable. And if there's a juggernaut out east or out west that are playing at a different level, the Celtics will probably make the playoffs, but get bounced out in the second round or early in the playoffs. So you got to look at this as a 3-year rebuild. Just be realistic as a Boston fan. You can't expect this team to just go out and contend by next year. I don't expect that. And the reason why I don't is because you look at the roster and the choices they got to make. They're probably going to keep Kristaps for now and build up his trade value again. Maybe there'll be somebody that'll step in and say, we want Kristaps, and they give him a good offer, but I don't see that right now. However, who knows? You look at the situation with Drew Holiday. Drew's movable, in my opinion. I believe a team like the Dallas Mavericks would pick up the phone and get him, because they need a veteran guard next to Kyrie Irving. And I think he'll benefit playing on the same timeline as a Kyrie Irving and an Anthony Davis. And then you bring in Cooper Flag. Dallas looks like a juggernaut out west. And then you can get a couple pieces in return. I'm thinking a guy like Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, because those guys are 26 years old. They've been to NBA Finals. Obviously, they played the Celtics last year. And that would help Boston, because now you have depth at the center, so you can transition off of Al Horford. You bring back Luke Cornett. I would probably keep Cornett as my third center. I know he showed flashes that he could be more reliable, but I think he fits better as their third option. So you got to find a backup. And then on top of that, who are you going to give up Porzingis for? Maybe you contact Houston. You get a Jabari Smith. You get a Eason. And those are good, valuable guys, because they're athletic, they can defend, and they're on the younger side. And they fit along the timeline of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. One of the challenges of giving up Drew Holiday is perimeter defense. Derek White is more of like a help defender. He can't really, guard someone in space, and the point of attack defense will definitely leave more to be desired. So the Celtics got to figure out that part as well. If you want to go another direction where you start rebuilding it completely from the ground up, where you trade Jaylen Brown and you go out and got heard about getting the second pick from the Spurs and you drafted Dylan Harper. You could do that, but I think that, furthers out the timeline, because, again, you're building a championship team and you're relying on a young guy to develop and, reach his prime. That could take like 5 years. And Tatum will be, 33, 34 years old? Do you think you want to stick around for that? Probably not. So it's a tough spot the Celtics are in. If I'm Boston, if they want to tank next season, I don't think that's a good idea either, because who knows if you can get a top pick. We saw this last year's draft where the Mavs, made the play-in and they got the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. So it's a tough spot. I think the Celtics should go out next year and just compete. I'm not saying they're contenders at all, but see what you have on this roster, like with a Baylor Shotterman, Jordan Walls, and see about, Kristaps Porzingis building up his trade value. I think the only guy I'm moving off of this offseason is Drew Holiday. If I move off Kristaps, I got to get something in return, and that might be difficult at first. So maybe you move off of Sam Hauser as well, just to get yourself under that second apron. There's a lot of moves that Boston has to make, and I believe Kristaps making $30 million, Drew's at 34, so they have some choices coming up, and they got to make them fast if they want to open up more options and have more flexibility. On the flip side of that, Jason Tatum is coming back next season. So what you don't want is a situation where the team is not ready to contend quite yet. And you can bring in rookies, but if you don't flip them for a veteran, option as Tatum's Robin, then you might have a situation where Tatum wants out of the Celtics because they might be 3 or 4 years away from winning championships. And he's like, well, I just won a championship 2 years ago. I don't want to stick around and go through this rebuild together. That might happen. So I think Boston needs to play this smart. I would look at, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, because you add depth to your wing spot. You add Daniel Gafford, who's a great rim protector and a great lob threat, and you can transition off of Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. And the only thing you got to really fix at that point is a backup center. You still have your Jaylen Brown, and you got to find a point attack defender next to Derek White. I think you got to keep Pritchard, White, Tatum, and Brown, in my opinion. If you trade Brown, I think that might, delay their timeline from contending again because you can bring in rookies. However, it's going to take time to develop, and you don't have experience you see in the playoffs until you hit like 25, 26 years old. That's when you start winning championships. And does Tatum want to wait 5 years until that happens? Probably not. So they just got to play this right and look at your options. Obviously, you want to get under the second apron. That's very important. However, I don't think you should be trading Jaylen Brown and, Derek White. Don't blow it up. That's not a good idea, trading for the second pick. I mean, you could do that, but I don't think it's the best move. I think getting guys around that 26-year-old range, like, a PJ Washington and obviously Derek Live would be great. But I don't think the Mavericks going to move off him, but Daniel Gafford. Now you've added pieces that will fit with Tatum's timeline and Jaylen Brown's timeline, and you have depth. And then when he gets back, he's got a really good roster around him to go out and pursue another championship with those guys. I wouldn't give up on Jaylen Brown. I know he had his rough moments this season, but if it does happen, I understand if you're trying to play the long term. Now, if you go that route and you draft, some young guys who have talent and you're playing to flip them for a second option, that makes sense. I don't think you should just keep them though, because unless Tatum doesn't look the same, if that's your reason, totally understandable. But if he comes back and looks like the same version or a little bit, less version of himself, but he's out there able to win you basketball games, get you on deep playoff runs. I think you need to have the adequate talent and experience around him. That's just my opinion. I know the Celtics are in a tough spot. It's tough to see as a Celtics fan because you've seen them at multiple conference finals over the years. You've seen them make 2 NBA finals, win a championship. We've been spoiled, and it's been a great run, but I'm excited for the rebuild. This situation was going to happen regardless of the injury because, the new ownership is coming in. Shams reported that they're going to trade some of these guys to shed some salaries so not in the second apron. So these moves were bound to happen. Like Drew was probably on his way out this summer. That's just a fact. And maybe Porzingis as well. Because you look at the situation, if Porzingis was the same guy and the Celtics miraculously found a way to win a championship with him being this sick, they would have moved off him regardless. So this was inevitable. I'm excited to see the rebuild. I trust in Brad Stevens. I think he'll figure this out and keep this roster competitive and keep it going in the right direction. Is it going to be tough? Yeah, because I think this team at best is a play-in team. Maybe you get 6th in the Eastern Conference because you catch fire, but that's the expectation right now, and that's fine. You're not going to be at the top every year, and imagine you lose your best player. Let's imagine that Shea goes down or Anthony Edwards or Jokic. Of course, it's a lost season. But if they play their cards right, if they get the correct pieces that fit alongside the timelines of Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, they're going to be in good shape. Hope you guys enjoyed this video today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the Celtics need to do this offseason. Who should they trade? Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.